It's been 36 years since partition. Margaret Thatcher has been Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for 4 years. Something is probably going on in Australia, and West Indies is still supposed to be the best team in the world. It's 1983, the final edition of the Prudential Cup. Naresh, you know about
Yes,
this
sir.
World Cup,
I am
the
not
first
gonna lie
one.
to you. I hear you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I did
India,
not know about
India,
this.
India, India.
Okay,
It's the fans
okay.
chanting in the
So,
background.
all right. So my history with all this is in 2011 when India wins it again for the first time after like 28 years. Everyone is like losing their minds, and they were just like, "Yeah, it's been 28 years since we won." Again, my math skills are somewhat. I haven't taken a math course in years, but it took me a bit to realize 1983 to 2011 was 28 years. And so I put two and two together well past that specific World Cup. Because I didn't realize how much it meant, but I think about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, when I actually just sat down and watched 1983, which
It's
was
just called 83.
oh, I'm a failure. That's all right. Um, so no, I watched 83 and I was like, yo, this is a pretty good movie. And I got you to watch it, and that's my background for 1983. And it was pretty cool. I did feel very patriotic at points, and it was very I can feel the emotion. It was really cool.
Yeah, and obviously we haven't talked about India much in the previous two World Cups because in total they had one win, and it was against that weird East Africa team in the first edition. So we'll talk about them a lot today. As I mentioned at the top, this is the final edition of the Prudential Cup. So it is the last time that England is going to host kind of in a row. They hosted the first three without like any bidding process or any discussion. Like they just kind of hosted the first three. Prudential Assurance sponsored all three of these events. So all three of these were actually known as Prudential Cups. They weren't known as the ODI World Cup officially. Um, Still eight teams, still a 60 over format. Seven of the teams remain the same. So it'll be Australia, England, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, West Indies, Sri Lanka, and this time Zimbabwe replaces Canada. There is a new tournament format. So it's a double round robin. And then the semis and the finals. The first two editions had just been those single round robins. Teams still wearing their all whites, still using a red ball, day only matches. And this one technically had one venue in Wales. So this one was co-hosted by England and Wales. There was one stadium in Swansea. Um, and then before we get into our background, I do have an update from the last episode. I said we'd bring this to you. So that first edition of the World Cup, there was the umpire that looked like he was 117 years old. At the time, he was only 61. He looked terrible for 61. Maybe it was just like the TV cameras weren't good back then. He did not look good. He lived another 20 years after that, but he did not, as far as I know, referee another final or umpire another final. I know he did not umpire in the in 79 or 83. At least in the finals, his name was Tom Spencer. So
Shout out Thomas Spencer. I swear, if it was not Thomas Spencer, there was definitely someone cosplaying him in that finals because there was someone that looked very, very
well,
similar.
there was a one of the guys did do both 75 and
Ah,
79. His name was
gotcha.
Dickie Bird,
Nice.
which is
Nice.
an
Classic.
insane name. That is the most
Classic.
insane 70s British name of all time. Okay, background stuff. So, Sri Lanka. Want to talk about Sri Lanka a little bit here. In 75, they just kind of got invited to get invited. In 79, they won that ICC trophy to qualify and win. In 1981, Sri Lanka was finally granted test status. So they were upgraded from an associate member of the ICC to a full test playing nation, which means that for this World Cup, and I imagine at least the next few World Cups, they just get automatic entry with the other test playing nations.
Mhm.
Um, they played their first test match at home against England in February of 1982. They, however, did not get their first test win until 1985. It did come against India. So
Classic.
India, the first team to lose to Sri Lanka in a test. And I hadn't realized when I was doing this research, their first game at the 1975 ODI World Cup was their first ever official ODI, Sri Lanka's.
Oh
So
wow.
kind of cool for them, but they've made it. I feel like we talked about them being in this limbo, but they were finally accepted to the adults table. And next up, the other team, the final team, the eighth team, Zimbabwe, qualified for the ICC trophy this time by winning that tournament. Of course, the previous edition, both semi or the two finalists made it, and then they played the final like during the actual World Cup, which was insane. This time they held the ICC trophy the summer before. So England hosted in 1982, Zimbabwe won it. And then in 1983, they were representing at the World Cup. They beat Bermuda in the final. A comfortable victory for them. But Bermuda keeps coming up. I feel like they've made some semis here in that tournament before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably I don't even know. It just feels like there's always a random country that just pops out and just competes. And for some reason, Bermuda is never able to overcome that hump. But I mean, shout out Zimbabwe for making that run to get to the World Cup the way they did, because that's pretty cool. I mean, I mean, at that point, I'm basing this off what you just said. For a brand new country to go through that qualifying process, win those games, and then make their way to the World Cup is pretty dope.
And I might be mistaken, but I think Zimbabwe was one of the three or four countries that had people on that East Africa team in the first
That makes
edition.
sense.
So I'm
Yeah, I was
wondering
gonna
that potentially some of these players might have had an appearance before, but I
mhm,
frankly didn't look into it. Um,
completely fair.
Gameplay logistics, same as the last few. So no player can bowl more than 12 overs. The games are still 60 overs, so we have not gotten to that 50 over mark. They get played to completion, even if it takes 2 days. The past two tournaments, they've had 3 days allocated for each game. In this tournament, they dropped it down to two, probably to keep the time span down as they're doing a double round robin instead of just the single round robin. Um, and that's that. Everything else has kind of stayed the same. So, Group A is England, Pakistan, New Zealand, Sri Lanka. Group B is West Indies, India, Australia, Zimbabwe. Um, Two notes about this. One, I know we've discussed this before. I really can't wait to find out when like they manufacture India versus Pakistan every time. Because now we're 3 for 3 where they've been put in opposite pools.
Yeah.
And like we know the first World Cup it was on purpose. I haven't found that written down anywhere for the second two, but I'm guessing it was probably on purpose. It seems
Yeah, it's
crazy
probably one of
now.
those unwritten rules type things where it's like between the two countries. Let's not try to raise any issues when we don't need to type thing. But I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, we know it's going to event. One of these days, we're going to be recording, and it's going to happen, and we're going to be like, "Holy shit, that was the moment."
Yeah,
It's going to
I
happen.
can't wait. And then like
Yeah,
every time after, it's going to be like everyone was like, actually, everybody loved this. We have
yeah.
to have this every time.
I mean, when the
Um,
ratings come in the way they do, money talks.
the other thing, I can't believe that India and Zimbabwe got put in the same pool.
I mean,
Like,
yeah,
I
because
guess people assumed Sri Lanka was better than India, despite the fact that Sri Lanka had beat India in the previous World Cup. Like, I'm guessing maybe it was just
yeah,
completely randomized. I didn't look into how it was, but like, Group B seems like a weak pool. Like is
yeah,
West
yeah,
Indies, who's awesome, and then kind of the two weakest teams, and then
yeah,
Australia, which by this point does have all their good players. Kerry Packer, that was his name, right? He's out of business. His
yes, yeah, yeah,
Major
yeah,
League
yeah, yeah,
Cricket or what? No, that's the new American one, World Series Cricket. That's what it was called.
yes.
Um, that's all done. So they have their good players again. So theoretically, they're an all right team. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Um,
thinking about it, what India has one World Cup win in the last 2 years, and Zimbabwe, this is their first time ever.
This is the first
So
time
if
ever
I,
in it. Sri Lanka
right,
has, I think, also one win because I
right, but
think they
that,
went
yeah,
over in the first year and then they beat India in the
that
second,
previous,
and so
yeah,
that's their only win.
Yeah, I mean, if I was on Pool A, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, "Yo, what is
Yeah.
this?" But I mean, that's hindsight, right?
And
And
I
that's
guess the
crazy
benefit there
thinking
is you
about.
dodge West Indies, right? Who hasn't lost
Yeah,
a game.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of not losing a game, this is the first World Cup where every single one of the eight teams won a game and every single one of the eight teams lost a game. So we are going more towards parity or at least like luck
Yeah,
playing into
yeah, yeah.
things. Obviously, with the double round robin, you get twice as many chances. So that might play into it. Um, Group B was the wilder group in terms of upsets. We're going to start with Group A. And England only dropped one group stage game, and it was the second time they played New Zealand. And I bring this up because New Zealand was chasing 234 and got there with 8 wickets down on the penultimate ball of the game. So at
Hell yeah.
59 overs and 5 balls is when they chased it down. So that must
That's
have been
awesome.
like a really cool game to watch.
Yeah.
Super close game. And then it set up the final group game for Group A was between New Zealand and Pakistan. And this game would decide which of those two countries would advance to the semifinals.
Mhm.
So at this point, New Zealand was 3-2, Pakistan was 2-3. So if New Zealand won, they'd go to 4-2 and just advance. If Pakistan won, both teams would be at 3-3. So Pakistan not only had to try to win, but they had to win by enough runs that their run rate would be higher than New Zealand's when all was said and done.
Mhm.
So Pakistan ultimately won that game by 11 runs, which did allow them to advance. They batted first, went 261, dropping 3 wickets, and then New Zealand was all out for 250, 1 ball into the final over. So
Okay,
this
okay.
game, like I said, Pakistan only dropped 3 wickets. They had their final partnership was Zahir Abbas and Imran Khan, who went 103 off 121 and 79 off 74, respectively. Um, Imran Khan was captain of this team. He was unfit to bowl and was just
Oh,
here as a batter. I didn't
all
know he
right.
was good at batting. I thought he was just a bowler.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've known him as a bowler, but no, I mean, that's props to
He
him then.
came in
That's
at
pretty
5 and
dope.
put up 79, not out.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah, no, that's
nuts.
that's that's crazy.
And he was unfit to bowl. I imagine that means it's like
His shoulder or
a
something like that.
shoulder or a hand or an
Yeah.
elbow, but I mean that's got to be at least some discomfort, or maybe it was like his heel or something. You know, fast bowlers and they have the
Gotcha.
I don't know, but to be like partially injured and to be batting like that is
I mean, they still
crazy.
had him at 5, so who knows how bad the injury was. Maybe it was just like a you can't bowl because your mechanics are off, but
They kept him in the
you're
squad.
still
I mean, just the
yeah,
fact that he
yeah,
couldn't bowl and they kept him in the squad, I'm like, damn, he's got to be a really good batter. Which I had
yeah.
no idea. Um, he also had a not out century against Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And then in the 4 other games, there was like not noteworthy like 20s and 10s and
Hmm.
stuff like that, kind of just like normal results. But um, huge learning moment for me. I had no idea that he was good at batting. Um, Moving to Group B. This is like the craziest day one of a World Cup we've seen. And I remember this was a plot point in the movie. And I think in the movie, because these games were played simultaneously, like all the group games
Hmm.
happened at the same time on the same days. I think they said in the movie, right, that the India, so I mean, spoilers for not only the movie, but Naresh, for what I'm about to say, like, so India beats West Indies first day of this World Cup.
Yes.
And I think they say something like it, and it wasn't on TV. Because like the other
Yeah.
game was the one that was on
It
TV.
I think it was well, I think spoilers for something else. I think there were multiple Indian games that were just not on TV
Well, yeah,
scheduled
only because they could
because
only
do
each
one of the
time
two. Yeah.
both games
Yeah,
played
yeah,
at the same
yeah.
time and they only put one on TV.
Yeah.
And so I think this was like that was not chosen to be the one on
Yeah.
TV.
I mean, it makes sense because India is bad. Like
Well,
in
you know what's
everyone.
crazy and like this is West Indies' first ever loss at a World Cup, so it
Mhm.
probably shouldn't be televised or whatever. Zimbabwe beat Australia in the other game.
Oh, so
Which,
there you
like,
go. Yeah,
which
yeah,
was
yeah.
equally like the biggest upset. Like,
Right, right.
Australia was supposed to be good this time. They brought all their good players.
Yeah,
And so, literally, day one, Group B, the top two teams in the pool both lost,
yeah.
like
That's
right from the
nuts.
jump. And they
Yeah.
must have been so thankful that it was a double round robin because if they both went 0-1, probably only one of them could have advanced in a single
Hmm.
round robin. And obviously only one of them did, but like that was crazy. So um Zimbabwe won 239 for 6 to 226 for 7. Both teams batted all 60 overs. Um, India beat West Indies. Like I said, it was West Indies' first loss at a World Cup at all in any game. 262 for 8, and then West Indies went all out for 228 and 54 overs. Um, which like that's insane. Just jumping right out. It's their second ever win in a World Cup game, and it was against a team that had never lost. Like
I mean,
the hype, the hype must have been insane
for sure. But now I need you to tell me how our boy Sonny G did.
in that game.
Yeah.
Sonny G in that game, 19 off 44.
Okay. So it all just goes downhill from there.
No, you mean it goes uphill from there?
I
Ni-
mean,
He he
I'm
ate
mostly comparing it.
44 balls and scored less than 20 runs
See,
against West Indies, who's like
I mean, I
famous for having three guys at a time put up centuries
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear you, but like 19 for 44, I would take that versus
in a
2 for
test game.
12.
Yes, I would also take that in a test game.
Fair, but I'm just comparing it to spoilers like his finals appearance where he puts up two
Oh, hey, don't
runs.
worry. I have the stats for all of his games.
Okay, perfect. I apologize for getting ahead of
No, we
myself.
don't. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna focus most of this episode on the finals, I think. But we
Yeah.
got all those Sunny G stats. The other important thing I wanted to pull out. It's a little bit of a plot point in the movie, but it's
Mhm.
also something that we've mentioned in these past two episodes where the West Indies bowling attack was famous for being um both the fastest in the world, but they would bowl a lot of bouncers, so
Yeah.
people were just afraid to face them. We pointed out that literally the commentator like called out that the English batters were wearing helmets and that that was a weird thing. So I did want to call out that two different batters did have to retire hurt against the West Indies bowling attack in the group stage. So that was Graham Wood of Australia, who was concussed after getting hit in the head by Michael Holding, and then Dilip Veng Vengsakar. I'm gonna struggle so much with these names of the guys that I don't remember from the movie. Vengsakar, who got hit in the jaw, bowled
Mm.
by Malcolm Marshall, and I know that was a plot point in the movie, but like
Yeah.
it was a real thing, and not wearing a helmet was kind of a sign of being tough or manly or whatever, and then you get whacked in the head and you're done. So not sure how
Yeah.
smart it was, but
Yeah. Yeah, be a man. Just suffer the CTE like 10 years later, 30 years later. But
yeah,
no,
it's
that's
nuts.
I mean, yeah.
And then
All right.
the other, and it's a big plot point in the movie, and you can understand why, because it was like the most interesting thing I would argue that happened in pool play at all, was
Mhm.
that the second time India and Zimbabwe played each other, um, India went down 17 runs for 5 wickets down, which is nuts. And
Yeah.
then Kapil Dev comes in and goes 175 not out off 138. So they ended at 266 for 8 down. Um, and won that game, which was important in terms of getting them to the semifinals. Syed Kermani came in at 10 and had the second highest score for India at 24 not out off like 56 balls. So that was just a one man effort. I know we had in a I think it was the finals in 1979, the Viv Richards game where like
Yeah,
he just took over, all of his teammates dropped. He had come in at three and put up a century and just could not be gotten out. And this
yeah,
time it was the Kapil Dev game. Obviously against a little bit lesser competition, but you have to imagine when five guys drop for 17, like something's going on.
yeah,
It's the wind or the pitch is weird or something, and he was able to survive and put up a massive amount of runs with a great strike
yeah.
rate.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other game that was not televised, and that's the one that I specifically remember where they were like, this historic performance by Kapil Dev was just not filmed because, I mean, who's watching India Zimbabwe? Like pre-tournament, no one's watching that game. Everyone's
Yeah.
like, yeah, these two are like not it, whatever, we don't care about them. And the fact that he went out, and again, this is part of the movie. Like, I'm a sucker for like the underdog story. I'm a sucker for these like amazing human achievements. And like I was watching this and I think it's really I don't know if they did it for the movie or if this really happened. The fact that he gives this like crazy speech about like I'm gonna take a shower and I'm not gonna come out until like you guys are gonna kill it, like you guys are gonna be
Yeah, I
amazing.
didn't
And they're
find that.
just like bang.
I didn't look at that story specifically. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
look
yeah.
for it, but I didn't
Yeah.
see it when I did my
See,
research.
that's the thing. Because like you if they just added it to be a plot point, that's just insane writing. Like what writer is like, yeah, let's put him in the shower before he's hitting a 175. Like it's too crazy to not be real is my thought process. But for him to just come out and like, as you said, like he was the captain, and that was a captain level performance. That was everything you hope for as a kid, like everything you want as a kid. And the fact that he carried the team to a very respectable 266, you said, right? Um,
Yeah,
like that,
266.
yeah, like that is especially at this stage of ODI where
He scored
266 is
he scored 175 of the
by
266.
himself.
That's insane.
Exactly. That's ridiculous. And the fact that he went not out, absolutely insane. And then part of that, there was a scene in the movie where the real life Kapil Dev is actually sitting in the audience, like watching the ball, like watching the actor like hit the balls. That was pretty cool. That was a nice little like, oh, that was funny. But no, that just unreal performance, and it's obviously very unfortunate that there was no footage of that, and we're obviously like I mean, I'm basing my knowledge of everything based off of what they show in the movie, but no, it was ridiculous. That was truly one of the greatest. I mean, that for me is on par with, I mean, I didn't see it, but for me, that brings up something like the Glenn Maxwell game where he
Yeah.
goes for like 200 and carries his team to
Yeah, the
wins.
double century against
Um,
Afghanistan was
yeah,
I still think I know I've said this to you before, Naresh, the
yeah,
most impressive sporting achievement I've ever watched live on TV that I didn't like
absolutely.
hear about later or see the highlights of. Like watching that live was unbelievable.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean that was ridiculous. And I mean, here is India starting to put some wins together, starting to get some really impressive games together and just in performances. So I wonder when the turning point was, like in real life, like when the reporters really started to be like, hey, this team is this team is not just like a fluke win. Like the fact they beat West Indies, the fact they beat Zimbabwe, who beat Australia, like these are all very impressive wins that are being pieced together.
Yeah, and India did go 1-1 against Australia. They ended the
Mhm.
pool at 4-2. They didn't like end it 3-3 and needed the better run rate against Australia. Like they took out West Indies, which Australia couldn't do. They went 1-1 against Australia, and then they took care of Zimbabwe. So like it was a real performance. They did not by any means sneak into the semifinal in the
Yeah,
sense that right, like Pakistan not only had to beat New Zealand in that game, but then they had to have a better run rate to still manage to do it. Um, and like you said, kind of the choice to not televise that game made so much sense if you could only televise one because not only had India only ever won one game, Zimbabwe was the only team in this tournament that didn't have a test. Um, they weren't a test playing nation.
yeah,
But India or West Indies, Australia was the final the last time Australia sent a real team.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
know they
yeah,
were
yeah.
really bad the last edition, and in 8 years you could lose a lot of players or whatever. But Australia was always known as a very strong team. And '79 was supposed to be a fluke. It wasn't supposed to be what happens every year. So I think probably from a producing standpoint and tournament director standpoint, you were like, yeah, this could be what the finals becomes. These teams could both advance out of the semis. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a shame to not have video footage, but you can understand why the choice was made, and in later years, obviously, all the games do get televised, which is good. Um, but moving to the semis really quickly, we're going to gloss over this and I think mostly spend the time on the finals. So, India beat England in the semis with 6 overs and 6 wickets to spare. So, a pretty comfortable win for India. And then West Indies beat Pakistan in less than 50 overs and they only lost 2 wickets. So, West Indies absolutely steamrolled Pakistan, which I don't think anybody was surprised about. And then it comes to the finals. So these teams were 1-1 against each other in group play. West Indies is now undefeated in the ODI World Cup except to India. So you could kind of view this potentially as like a maybe India was the only people suited to potentially beat them. I'm not sure. You could also say like they just surprised um, the West Indies the first time. In their second match of that group play game, West Indies went 282 for 9, and then India was all out for 216 and 53
Yeah.
overs. So pretty comfortable win for West Indies. They put up nearly 300 and had no trouble getting India all out. So I really don't know what the thought was by fans, by media at the time. I'm guessing people just thought West Indies would win easily.
Yeah, I mean everything you just said, right? First game of the day, first game of the World Cup, India just shocks everyone, wins. But then the next game, West Indies comes back and dominates. And so it's like for me, just thinking about it sports wise, I would just chalk it off to first game. Yeah, they didn't take them as seriously. Second game, they dogged them, and now third game, it'll be West Indies rolling them again. And I think that's for me, like if I was just a regular sports fan at that time, I think that's what I would be envisioning. Like I would just say, yeah, no, this is going to be a blowout.
Yeah, and the first innings, you would have turned off your TV and gone and found something better to do because
Yeah,
India was all out for 183 in 54.4 overs. West Indies' lowest score to that to this point in this tournament, in the 1983 tournament, was 172, which they reached in 45 overs without dropping a wicket to beat Zimbabwe. Their lowest score ever in a World Cup game when they bat first was 244 in 1979. So like this was game over.
yeah,
183 to this day through the 2023 edition of the World Cup, ODI World Cup, is still the lowest total ever successfully defended in the finals. Like this was an insane thing. So
yeah.
India all out 183 and 54.4 overs. West Indies end up going 140 all out in 52 overs. And I think the interesting story from this final, as I went through everybody's stats and tried to piece together a narrative to this game, was that no one was the hero.
Yeah.
Nobody on either team stood out at all. Everyone who bowled in this game for both teams had insane stats, as you could imagine. And like nobody particularly stood out. No one took a 5 wicket haul. Nobody had like an insanely high economy that ruined it for the rest of the team. Like nobody got a century or a half century in this game batting. Like there was no heroes. And I do want to go through these bowling stats because they're nuts. And obviously, with the low scores, you'd expect that. But West Indies bowling first. Andy Roberts takes 3 wickets at 3.2 economy. Joel Garner took a wicket at 2. Malcolm Mitchell took 2 wickets at 2.2. Michael Holding took 2 wickets at 2.7. Larry Gomes took 2 wickets at 4.5. And then Viv Richards bowled 1 over and gave up 8 runs without taking a wicket. India Kapil Dev, 1 wicket at 1.9 economy. Balwinder Sandhu, 2 wickets at 3.6. Madan Lal, 3 wickets at 2.6. Roger Binney, 1 wicket at 2.3. Mohinder Amarnath, 3 wickets at 1.7. and Kurdi Azad took no wickets at 1.7 in 3 overs. So like
I,
basically
I,
everybody who bowled more than 3 overs took at least one wicket. What
yeah,
was the highest economy? I said like 3.6. Oh no, 4.5 for Larry Gomes of West Indies. Like
yeah,
it's like no one could hit. And
yeah.
I'm wondering if it was the pitch at Lord's. I wonder if the pitch was prepared in a way that made this inevitable, or if something was going on with the wind or the sun, or if just like all of the bowlers were on that day. Like I don't know, but those lines, like the fact that it's that even across everybody on both teams is just it really stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think similar to you, I think that was very much a conditions thing because if it's not a condition, like obviously some pitches are better for bowlers, some pitches are better for hitters or batters. I just think this was the way that it was either prepared or the way everything was going. It was just conducive for the bowlers to just dominate. And I think in one of the in the finals game, there was one ball, I forget who bowled it, but the swing on the ball was ridiculous, where it went like it looked like it was just going to go to the outside. It was going to be a wide, and then it just swung so in, and it clipped the outside wicket for an out. And I think that sort of condition and that sort of movement is just so hard to hit, especially for at that time when you were most likely looking to defend. You're not ready to hit those type of balls aggressively. So when you're trying to just let it go and you're just going and the ball swinging back the way it does, I don't doubt that that sort of thing happened, and is why we got the economies that we're getting. Like 1.9, 1.71, 2.3s, like those are ridiculous to hear about. Like that's cricketer of the wicket, sorry, that's bowler of the year caliber performances if that was happening now.
In
And
Test
like
cricket.
in
Those are
that,
good
yeah,
Test
like
cricket numbers.
ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and speaking of pitch conditions, like watching that final, because again, the ICC does have like 10-minute highlight videos of all the finals matches. So that's kind of all the video been able to see of these early World Cups. There were one or two deliveries where it looked like the ball skidded after
Mhm.
it hit, and I really thought the ball was going to go like well over the stumps, and clearly the batters did too because they'd leave them, and then it was just clipping the top,
Yeah.
and like those conditions looked just absolutely miserable.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a bowler, you're enjoying it, but
Yeah.
it was, I think, just looking at it, I think one important part that you said that I really just straight up thought was there was never a moment in this game in the highlights that I was watching where I was like, India's gonna win this. Like it was
Yeah.
never like they have it, they're gonna win it because I think it was around the 30 over mark where India was 90 for three, and it's just like, bro, they're gonna get blown out. It's not gonna be close. Because some of these batters that were getting out, they were getting out very early, and so it wasn't a good feeling just watching these highlights, knowing that you have the West Indies batters the way they go. And then on the flip side, as soon as West Indies start batting, it almost felt like when one wicket went down, the next one was going down immediately. And then they'd have a
Yeah.
little stretch of people were hitting, and they were like, yeah, if these guys last, they're going to win the game. But then they fall. And then as soon as he falls, so the next batter falls. And then they have this other brief little respite of like, yeah, if these guys last, they're going to do it. And then they fall. And I think it's just, that's something we talked about in terms of momentum in the game, where it just felt like because of how good the bowlers were, there was no momentum that was able to just be taken. There was no the momentum was never taken advantage of by the hitting squad, especially for the chasing team in West Indies. Because I mean, if you're getting out for 140, that's dominant
So
by the Indian
to add some
bowlers.
stats to that exact point, the
Yeah,
highest total for any batter in this game was 38 off of 57 by Indian opener Chris Sikanth.
Srikanth.
So what was that?
Chris Srikanth.
Srikanth? Is there an R in
Yeah,
there? I
because
missed it.
there
Srikanth.
is.
So
Yeah.
completely didn't see that in my writing. So but yeah, to that point, the highest total of anybody was an opener in the first innings and they got 37. Like, yeah, it's tough to build a partnership. Like maybe you can get a 40 run partnership and you can get both guys up to 20, but teams were even struggling to do that. Um, I also want to throw out that India's final three batters. So obviously the guys coming in at 9, 10, and 11 are going to be the weakest on the team. When the rest of your team's falling like this, you're going to kind of have fingers crossed, just survive, see if you can get some accidental singles or some wides or something. Those three guys added 42 runs to the score. India ended up winning this game by, where do I have it written
I think it was like
down?
43 runs because
43 runs.
yeah.
Yep. And they put up 42. So obviously, if you're chasing 140 instead of 180 and you have guys start to fall, you might be less aggressive because you need a lower
Mhm.
run rate and all this other stuff. And I understand that. But the fact that the final three guys to come into bat, all of whom were bowlers, managed to put up 42 and then you win by 43, like absolute shout out to those guys for battling it out when they watched all their teammates fall really, really quickly.
You know what? I think that's terribly disrespectful to Sonny G because his two runs
Yeah, his two
were the
runs,
difference
two
of
for
the
12,
game.
by the way, as the other opener for India. So, um, well, we're gonna get into Sunny G slander here in just a minute, but the last thing I have, man of the match, um, Mohinder Amarnath took
Yeah,
the man of the match honors home, 3 wickets at 1.7, 26 runs off of 80 balls. He came in at number three, so he came in when Sunny G went down. He was also the man of the match in the semifinals as just
mm,
this elite all-rounder who was coming in at three
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and taking wickets at an incredible economy rate. So I wanted to make sure that his name was said because uh, I frankly don't remember him from the movie. And I know part of the movie, like to make it colloquial, you're calling people by nicknames and this and that. And I
yeah,
might have just
yeah,
missed
yeah.
him, but like I didn't, it was a name that I read and I was like, I don't remember this from the movie in a way that I recognize some other guys' names.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I've seen so many Indian movies since then that I kind of forget most of it, but like, it is what it is. I know just enough to be able to speak about it, but that's okay.
Okay.
Um,
Sonny G watch. Here we go. All of his stats. West Indies, game one. India wins. Sonny G goes 19 for 44, which, whatever. Zimbabwe, 4 off 11. Australia and then West Indies part two did not play. He was hurt. That was a plot point in the movie.
hurt.
Kapil Dev was like, hey, you're not that hurt. You should play. I don't know why he wanted him to play. He was quite bad at opening.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe, next game, he comes back. Let's take it easy, go against these clowns. 0 out on the second ball. Australia, 9 off 10. And then in the semifinal, 25 off 41. The finals, 2 off 12. So, like a good semifinal, I guess, against England, 25 off 41.
I mean, sure. If you're the opener, if you're the opening batsman and you don't have a
And this was his third
signature
World Cup.
game,
This was like a
yeah,
veteran
exactly.
guy on the team.
I mean, he like I think one of the plot points in the movie was outside of Sonny G, who actually do they have on the team? Like
Yeah.
hitting wise. Like they don't it's Sonny G and then a bunch of scrubs is the way they portrayed like the first like 15, 20 minutes of the movie because they were just like, why is India even going to the World Cup? Like why? It's not that serious. And I think his performance was just a collapse of I don't know. I
I
just
think
enjoy
this
the
is
Sunny G
just
slander.
like, this is a combination, I think, of A, us learning, but B, like ODIs was still new. It was like a
Mhm.
10-year-old thing or a 12-year-old thing since the first ever ODI, never mind since the first World Cup. And so I feel like people didn't necessarily want to change what their overall strategy was from test. And I think that's part of it. And then I think, at least I've only been watching cricket for like 4 years now, or 3.5 years. And I feel like all of the ODIs I've seen have been, the strategy there has been wildly influenced by T20.
Mhm.
So, like, I feel like people probably thought this was good and worthwhile, and 60 overs, not 50. So, like, taking, breaking the new ball down, letting it soften up for the next batters, like, maybe that. was considered more valuable. And obviously there was no T20 format where like just mashing constantly was the only strategy. And then like, because I feel like once you start mashing and you don't care if you get out, you're going to get better at not getting out while doing it.
Yeah.
Like it's easier to scale from T20 up to T50 or well to ODI than
ODI. Yeah.
to like take it from test to ODI. So I guess all that to say like I respect that he was a good player and a good test player, but like these ODI stats, especially when you compare them to like some of these West Indian guys of his own generation, like it's kind of wild that people know who he is. And he must have been a phenomenal test player because these
Yeah. I
ODI
mean,
stats like do not lend it to him being in the top half of his team in
yeah.
terms of value.
Yeah. I mean, I think the important, and I know we're just like just digging around and making fun of him and all, but like I this really reminds me of in the mid 2010s when put it in NBA terms. I think it really goes into the small ball era of what the NBA turned into, where everyone on the field, on the court, can move the ball well. They can shoot, they can pass, they can cut, versus what it used to be was you had two big men who were clogging up the paint. You couldn't really drive. You had to get the ball into the big man. And so some teams that were still operating like that, some players that were still very much get the ball to me, I'm a big man, I'm gonna use my fundamentals, I'm gonna put up a inefficient 20, 30 points, to then almost overnight they just were not useful anymore. And I think similarly the test format was this clog up the balls, like use up as many balls as you can, and try to
And it still
stay on the
is.
field. And it still is, of course. And I think that's obviously the difference between a basketball
Yeah.
versus like cricket, where there's multiple different formats. Where it's like cricket in the test format, you're trying to clog up the innings as much as you can, stay on as long as you can. And I think that change of the format and asking these players to be that versatile is extremely difficult. And that's something that we're joking about, but like to the people that can do it and play all three formats, like that's ridiculous. When you
And
actually
I
think
think
about
that's what we get today, where like
it. Hmm.
there's a number of players who can play all three, and they are like widely regarded as the best players in the world by everybody, and they
Yeah,
should be. And then
yeah,
there's other players who like you only see in test matches, and then there's other players who you only see in T20 comps. And like it seems like at the time, because I think kind of the only time anybody was playing ODIs was like these World Cups. I don't think
yeah,
there were a lot of like bilateral series for this. Like yeah, you're just going to use your test players, and not all of them are
yeah.
going to be able to translate down. So, but yeah, it's just interesting to like look at it through the eyes of like someone whose name still rings true today, who like I only know as a commentator. So to then discover his stats is just funny to me. Also, speaking of that, shout out Ravi Sastry took his spots the two games he didn't play. So just power combo there back in the 80s and on the mics.
Yeah.
Um, Final two things I want to talk about before I move into a little bit of a goofy thing. Um, Crowd control. Way better. Big
Hmm.
improvements. Good job, guys. Not
Real
nearly as many
quick.
people running onto the fields.
Yeah.
There were a few for boundary throw-ins, and there was like near the end of the game where I think people realized India was going to win. People started to run out like when there was a catch or something like that. But I did notice a lot of people patrolling the boundary in like ICC
Hmm.
uniform stuff that I think were there for security to try to prevent people from running on. They did still rush the field at the end of the game though,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
um, is just still no good. And I know I there was a different series of on John Boy Media where they watched like all these old World Series. That used to happen at the World Series too. It's like
Hmm.
this is not just the thing that's happening in England and in cricket. Like it was happening in the US with our sports too.
Yeah. I did want to shout out that dude in the orange sweater who looked like he got the boundary ball, launched it. He had an arm. I All I'm saying, that dude had an arm. I just wanted to shout him out because that was very, very cool.
Good stuff. There was I had written down there was Kapil Dev made a catch like an over the shoulder running
Yes.
back.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
a
yeah.
really impressive catch. Good stuff from him.
Yeah.
And then one other thing again, highlight video, it's hard to judge TV production values on highlight videos because we don't know what is being left out. We don't know what graphics are going in and out of overs. We don't know that sort of stuff. Um, I will point out that to no point here has there been a score bug to let you know the score. Even in the highlight videos, they sometimes show the camera focusing on the huge scoreboard that's for in the stadium. So I think that's all they did. I think like every few overs they just showed you the scoreboard.
Yep.
Um, they did have a picture in picture though for runners, which I thought was really
Mm.
interesting because that's not something we have today. But like when the ball got hit and you weren't sure if it was going to go for one or for two, they would do a little picture in picture and keep the camera on the wicket so you could see the guys running and know what the stuff was going to be. So I thought that was cool. Like
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
little attempt at like improving your TV production values. Um, Anything else about this game, Naresh, or about kind of your takeaways from it? And then I'm going to move on to like a bigger picture, what this meant sort of discussion.
I mean, immediately off the top, I think one of the really cool things, obviously, the bowlers were different, but the fact that Kapil Dev was the one to catch both Viv Richards and Clive Lloyd, two of the greatest batsmen of their time, and the fact that he was the one to do it is, I think, very fitting to the almost the full narrative of this story that he put together for the 1983 World Cup. I think just as you said, it was a very much a team effort all the way around, and I don't think anyone would have expected a West Indians collapse for 140 runs. I think that the fact that it was 140 at all, like it was ridiculous. So overall, I mean, a hell of a performance all around. I think one, it's definitely one. I can't even say it hits home for me because I don't have like an emotional connection to this, but just seeing the fact that that was the last time, or that was the first time that India had won, and before that they hadn't won that. They had won one game, and then after that they didn't win again until I was alive, is just really cool to think about, really crazy to think about. And I think this was just an end of an era for West Indies, where after
Yep.
that we really just don't hear about them as at the highest stage of the world anymore. Like you see the next generation of athletes come in and they really, like the Chris Gales of the world, the Russell Martins, no, I forget his name,
Andre Russell.
Andre Russell.
I think Russell
But then
Martin's a
like
catcher for the Blue
the
Jays and the
Blue Jays. But I
Dodgers.
remember Russell
A
Martin
Canadian
being,
baseball player.
well, yeah, but like there was a guy that had like a very similar name to Russell Martin, which is
No,
why,
I get it. I'm just trying to
yeah,
explain for people who don't know what
yeah.
baseball is why the name Russell Martin came up. Who
um,
is not a
but no,
famous player. Like this
whoa,
is
whoa,
like a
whoa.
deep
Russell Martin
hole
was a very good catcher in his time.
15 years ago.
Um, but
Yeah.
no, yeah, overall, I think just the overall fact that this was like an end of an era is almost just sad. And I think that's it's not a way that you would want to go out if you were West Indies, but
Yeah,
just
not at all.
crazy run, crazy absolute monster run that they had. And just for me, as someone who's learning the game like through these videos, having these conversations, I think Viv Richards is has really turned into one of my all-time favorite cricketers and just dare I say athletes. Just to see the way he carried himself, the way the how dominant he was for how long he was, just truly phenomenal.
Yeah, he was one of very few players. It might have actually only been him and Clive Lloyd to be on all three of those teams. Because that first team in 75 did not have a lot of crossover with the team in 79. So
Right, right, right.
um just the longevity there was massive. All right, we're done learning. So if all you're doing is here to learn, see you later. But if you want to hang out and listen to some cool sports talk radio, I got another 5 or 10 minutes here for Naresh. Um, Two questions, hand in hand, very close to your heart. Which upset is more impressive? This one or The Miracle on Ice? And which movie is better, 83 or Miracle?
Oh,
And while you think about that, for anybody who doesn't know, it might only be in the American parlance. 1980 Winter Olympics, hosted the United States in New York. The United States beat the Soviet Union in actually the semifinals, which what meant that they would go on to the finals. They did win. The Soviet Union hadn't lost a hockey game anywhere. I think in like 6 or 8 years, they'd won the Olympics in 64, 68, 72, and 76. So four-time defending champs. And the United States at the previous Olympics had gotten like ninth, and were absolutely terrible.
Okay, so I think personally, I think these are obviously very fun. Both were fun matches, fun games, but just storyline wise, I think you can't beat Miracle on Ice. I just think the fact that you have
Okay,
grown adults.
hold on. Story-wise, you can't beat it. Does that just mean that you like the movie Miracle better than the movie 83?
I think for
Because I
both
asked both
questions,
questions, and I think they're
yeah,
different questions.
for both questions, I think I personally liked Miracle on Ice better. Um, but movie wise, I think there's more of a it could be like a 1A, 1B type thing, but like story wise, just overall his like the impact of everything. Because again, this was at the height of Soviet Union's dominance. The fact that you took, I mean, in the movie they talk about it where they pulled one of the greatest goaltenders of all time because a bunch of college kids were able to get past him multiple times. And the fact that you see these like little things that really added up to this massive monster upset, I think for me, Miracle on Ice is the better story. Movie wise, I think it is 50-50. But I think as a overall, okay, I'm not going to lie to you. This might sound cliche. The one thing that really upset me about this finals game, and maybe it's just because we were watching the highlights, the winning call just did not do it for me. Like, and I think that's part of
I,
it was because of the blowout. But
I'll
the
say this. I've watched a lot of cricket in the last 4 years, and in my whole, whatever, 30 years watching sports, I've watched a hell of a lot of sports, a hell of a lot of different sports. American commentators are way better at making a big deal and doing a final call than anybody in another sport is. Like,
yeah,
and
I can see that.
particularly the best American, and this is, I think this is a weird thing. The American commentators who are best at it are recognized at being so good at it that they get to do all sports.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right? That was Al
yeah.
Michaels. That was a really young Al Michaels, but he does NFL. He was doing hockey at the Olympics. I believe he had a stint with ABC doing Major League Baseball games.
Mhm.
He's called golf. Like, it, if you're basically in America for commentators, if you're good at talking and good at building a moment, you can do any sport. And then they'll
Yeah,
stick you with like a color guy who knows about the sport. And I feel like in cricket, it's the cricket commentators.
yeah.
And especially
And it's
back
a
in the day, I
different.
feel like in English people are just, I think all the commentators had been English because they were in England, and like
Yeah,
they're just very reserved. And I feel like that makes for less exciting stuff.
yeah, yeah. Like I was watching the highlights and I was just watching it. I was like, bro, the game's almost over. There's no excitement building. There's no just overall like euphoric. I mean, again, I understand they wouldn't be euphoric because of like India winning, but it's just the idea, the storyline of this random
No,
team coming out
th
of nowhere.
they should be euphoric. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
sure, if India beat England to win it, like sure, you're homers and
mhm,
you should have taken your bias out of it and you couldn't, but that's fine. Like you should be completely neutral. It's two countries
yeah,
that you are not from, two teams that you don't normally root for. Make it exciting. Build the story. Like it was all there. India couldn't win. West Indies had not failed to score this few runs ever. And like, yeah, like you're
yeah,
saying, there was no build up. And again, it's so hard with the highlights, but like every wicket call, the guy should have been losing his mind for the last three or four. And like it
yeah.
just wasn't there.
Especially like the back-to-back wickets, like when Larry Gomes gets out for 4 on 66, and then immediately the next ball, Clive Lloyd gets out for 5 for 66. Like, dude, like that's insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. But no, I think like so yeah, going back to your questions, I think movie wise, I still would probably go Miracle on Ice because some of the moments on Miracle on Ice I've just known, I've been with, I've like held on to it for a lot longer.
We've both seen
And
that movie 100 times.
exactly. So it's like I think for me that's just the winner, but 83 is a very, very good movie and I do appreciate it. The only thing that like bugs me with it is the fact that I have to watch it with subtitles because I don't understand Hindi. So like for me, that kind of takes away the overall immersion of it. But overall, the movie itself was really good. I did find myself getting emotional to certain things. But I'm also a sucker for stuff
Anything.
like that. So that stop it, not anything. But no, I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. But no, I think Miracle on Ice, better story, just bigger stakes. I think because we're looking at two like superpowers of their era, Cold War, like everything was just in play, and just you're taking grown adults versus college kids, and no one was expecting college kids to do
I
anything.
think that's
So I
really
think
the
all of
big
that.
thing. I think the big thing is that the story of Miracle is it's a bunch of young people that make it their goal and will do anything to achieve their goal for 8 months. And at least with 83 and kind of like the idea of this, and I don't know how much of it's factual, but it was like it was a bunch of guys, some of whom were older and some of whom were not, who all showed up and didn't really know why they were there. It was kind of an afterthought for India, the country, as well as India, the cricket team or organization. And like, then they did good, which is nice, but it's a less satisfying story when told like that.
Yeah, but I will say the impact for each sport respectively beyond those specific moments, crazy flip. Because that specific moment in India just catapulted cricket to the heart of the country. Hockey, we obviously are still like not seeing it as
No,
big in the
it had just as big of an impact, but it
gotcha.
was the opposite. It destroyed Soviet hockey. It destroyed their program. And like, yeah, in
Oh,
the United States it didn't take off, but that was the
right.
end. Everybody got fired and they lost one game and they threw out everything they'd worked for 20 years
Oh, wow.
as a way to respond to this.
Right, right, right.
And that's
That's
yeah, I think
crazy.
that's what it was. And
Well, I
like
mean, yeah, I was specifically thinking about it from the American aspect of it because in America, crazy upset win, but hockey just never took off. But then in India, crazy upset win, cricket became the heart of every child at that point. And I think that's a fun little cameo we saw at the end of the movie. Just insane the fact that they had a little Sachin Tendulkar show up,
so
right?
that
Like
was
that
so
was
dumb.
ridiculous.
I know I've watched a lot fewer Bollywood movies than you, but that was so dumb.
Dude, that was so good. That was brilliant TV. That was phenomenal.
All right, I think that's going to do it for us this week. That is the 1983 World Cup. Next up, 1987. Big news for us. I don't know who's in the finals. I don't know what country it takes place in. Guys, we're going to do this one fully blind, but we will learn along with you next time.